Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass. And the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She's black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly I realized that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. Falling into that space of receptivity and just closing your eyes if that feels comfortable. Your hands face up on your lap. And entering the cathedral of the body again, where you had been standing maybe at the big doors, nearby, but not within. Just coming back in, coming back home to that cathedral. And then letting everything soften and fall around that conduit between the heart and the head. Starting with your awareness here at the center of your forehead. Picturing yourself not as yourself, but as a light in that space. And then softening the muscles around the eyes and the jaw and the mouth. And the inner tenseness of worry or doubt. That kind of clenching that holds on to what it can't control. Letting go of that, softening that too. And then lengthening the neck a little. Maybe pointing the chin slightly upward. Just for this half an hour, just to experiment with vulnerability, to open at the throat and at the level of the heart. Cathedrals have these huge doors that are heavy and hard to open, but they let in all of that space to just throw the doors open. And then letting the shoulders fall. And the belly softening. And the feet flat on the ground. I'm here again. I'm here again. And then breathing in to the count of 4. Pausing at the top of the breath, and then releasing to 5. Maybe we're meeting all of those worries and doubts, those self-reprisals at the top of the breath, and we're taking them with us and just bringing them out of the heart and releasing them. The count of 4, pausing at the top, truly imagining just grabbing all of them, gathering them up, and taking them out and releasing them back. At Newgrange in Ireland, there's a design so similar to a cathedral where the sun at a certain time of day comes into that darkness and pierces the altar where all of the ashes of the dead have been laid, waiting for it. And then as it sets, it creeps backward as if taking the dead with it and bringing it back to the source. Breathing into 4. Releasing it back to the count of 5. A blessing. Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass. And the eyes of those 2 Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She's black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. What makes a poem last like this poem has lasted? Paramahansa Yogananda says, and I've used this line in the past, I love it so much when talking about what good poetry really is. He says, the blossom falls away when the fruit appears. And there's a sparkle on the surface of some poems but no fruit being born underneath. And on other poems, we might get all caught up in the sparkle for a long time until finally we realize that there's something much more nourishing, something heartier underneath that gorgeousness of the sounds of the words or the metaphors or the shape of the poem on the page. Something that is more than the blossoms in a poem that is great and that lasts. And I think what it is contradiction, complicatedness, even bewilderment, and a mind that's willing to change right before our eyes. I think it's those four things, for me at least. For others, it might be different. But this poem has all of those things that I value so much in poems that I return to and read again and again, preferring them over new poems. Contradiction comes through in lines like, darken with kindness. What is it to darken with kindness? Or they love each other. There's no loneliness like theirs. And the bewilderment comes through because the figure in this poem is searching for a way to make contact and gets as close as humanly possible without ever reaching it. And it seems like something comes to him over the course of that path toward the other. At the end, suddenly I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. That's what makes this poem so interesting to me. The questions that I'm asking are not easily answered. And yet there's a flavor to them that goes very deep, that's very textured and rich. In fact, in poetry workshops, beyond asking about the sounds of words or the images or the story that's being told or the issues that come up or what the identity politics of the poem happen to be, or even what the spiritual nature of the poem is, beyond any of that stuff that we usually talk about in a poetry workshop, you could just ask students, where is the most complicated statement in this poem? Where does this poem refuse to reduce its knowledge to an easy answer? What ideas are changing before our eyes? Where is the bewilderment in this poem? And how does it bring a flavor to it? So James Wright spent a lot of time in Minnesota in the 1960s and 70s, thanks to his friendship with Robert Bly. This poem could be about two friends, maybe James Wright and Robert Bly, driving down the highway together, or it could be about two lovers. I think it probably started in the friendship zone, and it can mean like two lovers meeting two horses. But it's about togetherness, and not just a closeness, but a togetherness that's so close, it feels unbearable. And you'll notice in the poem that there's this gradual stepping over boundaries. They're driving on the highway in Rochester, Minnesota. So there's a town and there's a state and there's a highway. And these are all things with shoulders and boundaries and borders, all in the first line. And then he steps over the barbed wire, pulls off to the side of the road. He's gradually stepping over these boundaries that are created by the mind forged manacles, Blake would say. So the figure in the poem keeps like stepping over this boundary, the highway, then that boundary, the grass, then that boundary, the barbed wire, until finally, by making that effort, these two ponies appear from the darkness and meet him halfway. And the two friends stand there in this space, meeting the two ponies. And the speaker gets as close as the ear, which is, the entry place for language, but this is the language of silence that they're sharing together. And that thin skin, which represents the most vulnerable part of the body, the skin over the wrist, and realizes that if I got any closer, if I stepped out of my body, I would explode in isness, you could say. So this is about as close as it can be to step out of your body without actually losing yourself. So the poem emphasizes not only the possibility, which is the blessing, that there is this realm outside of the body, stepping over boundary after boundary. And the final boundary, of course, is language, because the horses are standing in silence before him and with each other. And that silence is what affords all of this togetherness. But it also marks the fact that in this life, there is always going to be a separation. So the poem is about coming as close to possible union as you can while still remaining in your life. It occurs to me that my own spiritual path could be read like I'm reading this poem, because I punish myself for the contradictions of my path, the good days and the bad days. I punish myself for its complicatedness, that it can't just be this easy ascent into this transcendent kind of awareness. I punish myself because I'm bewildered half the time, not knowing what to do next. I punish myself because I change my mind about it. And yet, if I look at how I value poems, I have to admit that these are all the qualities that I love best and what makes poetry for me interesting. And poetry is teaching me all the time to know how to value what I would look at as errors, but actually are the best things about this thing that we're doing together. How do we get there? In James Wright's poem, it's clear that he gets there through the silence of animals. So it might be for you that walking over that first boundary and then the next and the next involves surrounding yourself with creatures, as I know some of you out there like to do, or with the silence of cathedrals, or with other architectural spaces. Being in Rome, for me, does that certainly, or with sacred reading every day, or playing music, or with relationships in which the two are not saying anything, but just being together, a quiet ride together. Or as Thich Nhat Hanh taught, mindful walking, eating and breathing. These are the gem tactics that I'm learning from this poem. And I learn from this poem all the time that we are always going to be separate. However, we can take every opportunity we can to get as close as possible to that thin skin that reminds us again, there's something more, even if language can't talk about it or get us there. Let's go back into it. Just taking one deep breath and letting the shoulders fall as you breathe in. That practice of 4 counts in and visualizing the grabbing of all of those reprisals and doubts. And as you breathe out to 5, releasing them into the world. Speaking to Tuna McIntyre, the Yupik dancer I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, he said in the Yupik tradition, the soul has 3 parts. One is your name. The other is the badness in you. And the other is the goodness in you. And in the Yupik tradition, when you die, your name goes to somebody else. The goodness goes to what we could call heaven. And the badness, it doesn't go to hell. There's no punishment involved. It goes into the earth. It kind of erases the whole idea of badness. That's why I thought about this meditation of grabbing the doubt, grabbing the worry, grabbing the bitterness, and taking it with you, releasing it to the earth. Just for this half an hour. You sit with this A, B, C, D. A, as it is. In the cloud of unknowing, the anonymous author says, nothing describes the everlastingness of God better than the one word is. I read that and I think the best way to be with God, to get as close as possible to that blossom space, is to remember that this is, I am. Can't do A without doing B. B is being here, falling back into the body, remembering the Eightfold Path that's called sati. Kidneys are working, your liver is functioning, your brain is sending messages down into your fingertips, your lungs. There's the conversion of oxygen into nourishment. See as that change happens. If you want to experience this life, you're going to have to experience change. Like a good poem changes its mind, or like in this poem, the ponies come to meet the speaker halfway. He makes the effort to leave the mind-forged manacles, and the ponies come to meet him. I think that's what I love the most. We can either resist the changes or we can let them take us to those edges where the ponies are. And then D, just don't judge yourself by watching all of this. You're doing the work. I'm doing the work. Even if your mind begins rambling, you just gently come back. Even if you tell yourself, I'm a bad meditator, I'm a bad Catholic, I'm a bad Buddhist, you just gently come back. That's all that's required. A blessing. Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass. And the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She's black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom.